All right, welcome to office hours for service APIs on August 12th. I added a lot to the agenda today. I somehow doubt we'll make it through all of that, but that's fine. We can always push some to tomorrow. But I guess since we're getting close to V1 Alpha 1, we might as well take a look at this to start off every call. I think we're making good progress here. Although we didn't move anything down this week, I think we've made, thanks to Harry, some great progress on TLS config, advanced routing. Bowie, I'm not as familiar with where you are on service level config. I know there's a doc here, but I'm not sure if it's been updated recently. And if you're talking, we can't hear you, Bowie.
I don't think his audio is connected.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, we can come back. James isn't here to talk about status and conditions. And well, actually, while I'm thinking about it, let me go ahead and link these two together because I have made, I think, decent progress on conflict handling, or we have made decent handling on conflict handling, but I've left that till closer to the end of today's meeting. But yeah, okay. So I think these are all moving forward, and we'll leave it at that for now. Actually, got some great feedback on this pre-alpha API review, and I did update it today. So this should represent the current status of our API. If anyone wants a really easy PR, there's a lot of typos and unnecessary comments, or just basically just wording things that Dan or I have identified here. I'm happy to take this on as well, but if anyone's looking for just an easy thing to contribute, this is certainly one of them. But beyond that, there's also some great feedback from Dan around some areas that are confusing. I've tried to highlight some of them in the actual agenda, but I didn't get all of them. So if you're interested, feel free to read through. I'm hoping we'll get some more reviewers as well as time goes on. But yeah, I thought this initial round was very helpful. Just a few things, yeah, typos. There's plenty that need to be fixed. There's this fun one that Dan brought up, that condition no such gateway class doesn't really ever make sense, or not that I'm aware, because it's not like there's going to be a single controller responsible for implementing this. I mean, I don't even know how this, we're imagining a world where there are potentially multiple controllers implementing gateway class. So which one would be responsible for this? It seems like a really potentially unhelpful, well, obscure maybe, and unclear status condition. So my theory would be that it should be removed.
Wouldn't a admission controller set that? Like if you had an admission controller that would keep track of the gateway classes, it could set that.
Oh, right. So we default this to on, and then, yeah, okay. I remember that now. Okay. So this would be admission controller or mutating webhook, depending on what component. Like, it sounds like we'll already have a mutating webhook, which I think could accomplish this, but admission controller, yeah, something in that space. That makes sense. And then finally, the gateway spec godoc hasn't been updated to match the new structure. I'd missed that previously, but that was a good catch by Dan in here somewhere. There's a few other things, but those were the things I thought were interesting and worth highlighting. There are more.
I thought the issue he raised about matching host names was interesting. I think if you in the in the HTTP host, in the HTTP host structure, yeah, there. If you scroll up.
Well, this is listener. Listener correct?
Okay.
It's HTTP route.
Yeah. So his point was here. It's weird. It has the same semantics as a hostname match, but totally different syntax, which is a good point, I guess.
And that is, yeah. That is a great point. I missed this one. Yeah. So I should probably, I don't think all the typos here are worth filing follow-up issues for, but something like this that requires a bit more thought, we should probably file a follow-up issue because I agree.
Yeah, that's kind of a nasty one because adding the hostname match field here, it feels a bit awkward. But
it does. Yeah, it
taking
does.
it away from the listener also feels a bit weird too. So maybe we get
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So encourage anyone to take a look here. If anything seems larger and I haven't already captured it here, encourage just a follow-up issue on the repo itself. Yeah. So I just wanted to highlight briefly the things that actually made it in the past week. There's a typo fix in HTTP route. The default route match type is finally prefixed. Thanks. Drop the default host. That's great, I think. And then move TLS minimum version outside of being a core field into just options. Well, as in it could be specified in options. And then reordering the make targets by Damien. So some good progress here, but I think we have a lot of bigger PRs that are currently in progress that I'd like to get in soon. And so that brings us to PR and issue triage. This is not an exhaustive list, but I think these are the most recent ones. As always, if you see your PR or issue isn't on this list, feel free to add it to this list at any point and we'll get to it.
Rob, I had a question on that alpha review. Are we going to retire that doc or just keep updating it?
So I updated it today. I plan to keep updating it as long as it is feasible. It is admittedly painful to update as predicted. But I would like to get, I think it's very valuable. I think there's something here about being able to review the entire API and at the very least,
it makes sense. We just need to make sure it doesn't get out of sync or something.
My goal is to make sure it's updated at least weekly. Okay, so this is the pluralized matches. This is a older PR that I know we've had some conversation around. I think all the feedback has been resolved at this point, and I think we got some approvals. I think LGTM did at this point. Is there anything else outstanding on this PR?
Was it merged cleanly?
Yes, I just repaged it.
Okay.
Harry, would you mind updating when you the GoDoc with your comment there, just to make it explicit that that the rule won't match if there's an empty HTTP route rule doesn't match any request.
Okay, so if matches is empty, this rule will never match.
Yes.
Correct. Okay, I can do that.
Thanks. I just had the same because I was on the HTTP route match object. It's the same thing.
Ah, okay, yeah, makes sense.
Okay. So that means that you would have to specify a match of path, yeah,
Slash.
just slash, yeah. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, we should add that as
Okay.
like the default match all should be path slash. And then I think that should
Yeah.
complete it.
Should we set that to be a default value here for matches?
Is it
Like,
possible to default an array?
I think so.
Oh, that's a little gross.
It's really gross. Yes.
Okay. Do you have any pointers
So
for that?
I guess we could that default does feel particularly gross, so I'm fine with leaving it off.
Yeah, let's see what the feedback is, but my inclination is to not have that. It feels
fine.
like it's going to be problematic in some way.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll
Cool.
update the GoDoc and ping Bowie and Rob. And James.
Yeah, it looks, otherwise it looks fine, so we can merge it as soon as you update.
Yeah.
All right, the next one was also from Harry. This is HB route filter. I know this had a decent amount of comments on this already. I'm just trying to remember the current status of this. I think you've resolved most comments and discussion at this point, right, Harry?
Yeah, I've resolved most. Go to the conversation view, I think, because the outdated diff sort of. I didn't see Bowie's comment here. Okay, that's new.
So that was instead of request header transformer, just request headers. Bowie?
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard if we say it's part of the stable API to not actually have it in there. I can't. True, the struct will get big. It just feels like it's hard. Like what else would we do to document it? And then we can work on making the names a little bit more concise, I guess. But that's just like a suggestion.
So to clarify, you're still suggesting this should be inside filters. It would just it's just a slightly different name.
Yeah, I made a comment about the filter name just because I think it might have too much implication on how it works, but
sure,
we can discuss that.
But it should, so I guess to clarify, you're not saying this should be top level within a route rule.
Let me see that again.
Let me go over to the types. So right now there's a concept currently known as filter, or well, in this PR known as filter, that is.
Yeah, it's like whether we have an indent or not.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel that bad. Like at least the grouping feels like it is okay. Oh no, pulling it up to the top means we'd have to talk about it as a group anyways, because we'd have to talk about sort of things happening and either modifying the request or response. Yeah, this one is somewhat of a matter of taste.
Yeah, I think one key bit is if this were top level, a list might make sense. If this were not top level, like this is a list within a list, right? So you could probably make this not a list. You could have a request headers that allowed you to add or remove, and you could put multiple of those transformers or whatever we want to call them in a row instead of having
But wouldn't that make it really, like, at least I know of most implementations, they do define it as a block by itself. Then wouldn't you have to gather up, like, let's say it's like kind of split across multiple entries, but not consecutive. Wouldn't you have to go and like gather them all up and then put them into the same thing?
Yeah. I guess it depends on how on the use case here, right? Like if filters are meant to be sequential or whatever we end up calling this concept, then if it were possible, you may want to add a filter, perform some other kind of action, like add a header, perform some kind of action, and then remove that header. This seems like a real stretch, but
yeah, my feeling was like that wouldn't be even supportable because I don't even know that many things that could do it without just writing like a Lua plugin or like a Wasm plugin.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's why I felt like, yes, it's a list, but we're saying that the order is up to the implementation in terms of how it gets executed.
Yeah.
In which case we probably shouldn't have a single element that's like add X and then a couple elements down, remove X from the header. That feels like it's just really much more verbose, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should stick to the simpler case for at least the core API. People can still use it. People can still specify multiple filters with, even in this form, right? Like, because the filters itself is a list, and then they can not do that, but that won't be supported by most implementations, right? Like a specific implementation can do like add header X, do some actions, remove header Y. Like the API is flexible enough to do that.
Yeah, I think like the most implementations having multiple of those is just probably is an error.
Yeah.
And then sort of like people can do it if they want to. It just feels pretty obscure.
Yeah. Okay, that works. So then this suggestion is really just a slight rename from
like basically try to make it a little bit more succinct. That's all. But I mean, we can go endlessly into that without having to block the PR.
Yeah. Okay. No, I can simplify the name. While we are at name, there is also one thread on this PR where this should be called actions. I think somewhere, but I'm not sure what to call it at this point. Yeah, this one. Yeah. So you can call it actions, filters, plugins, add-ons, something like that. I didn't call it action.
Don't we already have?
Yeah, so that's the reason I didn't call it actions, is because the HTTP route action is of type action, is of
right.
Actions.
Yeah.
That would be like, yeah, this one, line 110.
Oh, I see. Yes.
So that's why, and filter was already present, so I just made it filters.
Okay, I mean, let's merge this PR. I don't want to kind of get wedged on having to rename this like right now in this PR. So let's get this PR in, and then we can talk about sort of the names independently, because that thing will just be a PR in if it's just renaming it if we rename it.
Okay, so I'll open an issue to track that conversation, just so that that feedback doesn't get lost, and then we can move from there.
So one thing with this PR, sorry, go ahead, Bowie.
No,
It's just
I didn't have
go
anything.
for the names and बाकी office भी बंद होगी खराब है.
Go ahead, James.
Okay. One thing with this PR I'm skeptical about is that it will gracefully extend to more filters. So, and I think the nature of the filter concept is you have lots of possibilities, right? So because filters is this generic thing, you go, well, I want to filter do this, 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 this. So say we end up with like 7 or 8 filters, like what would that look like in this filter struct? Does it end up with, you know, a field, each has its own struct field in there? Or do we end up with like CRD, just using the CRD stuff? So I think that's my concern around this.
Yeah.
So the alternative is to loft it above filter, I guess, as the filter concept is not useful.
I don't know. I don't like it. The two alternatives that I can think of are to use the type name and a raw extension, and to give up on static validation, or to use the CRDs and give up on the simplicity. And I don't, you know, I'm not too thrilled with either of those, really.
Yeah, don't we actually, this also has the CRDs, doesn't it?
Yeah, so there is a point for extension we're using CRD, but there is no, like, we had a config which was removed, which was similar to the raw extensions thing, but we removed that for, I think, a very good reason was we want the same semantics everywhere. We have like extensions everywhere. We don't have like a raw extension anywhere. So yeah, I mean, I totally hear you out, James. The only thing is like, which trade-off do we make in the either of two proposals that you have? This one looks ugly in the Go doc, but if you try to actually lay it out from the user's perspective, it's not as ugly.
Yeah, like at least the fields that we expect in basic core and extended, they definitely have to appear here, and I would not like to have to require people to use CRDs just to do those things for something as simple as header manipulation. To be fair, like eventually this thing will kind of grow a lot, but in some sense that's unavoidable because you have a lot of choices anyways. And if you split them into CRDs, this struct will be small, but the list of CRDs actually is pretty hard. And then you don't get any type guidance when you, let's say you use some autocomplete. Because I don't think they will understand it.
I wish we had some reasonable kind of one-off support here.
Yeah, that's what's missing from the type system, is that
you just need to say like you can have one of these fields, and then it'll be okay. That'll be fine.
So we do have that using the union discriminator, right? Like the Q builder does not support it, but that's exactly.
But that means that the union discriminator doesn't do anything.
For now, yes, definitely. But I'm assuming like Q builder maintainers will add that in, we'll regenerate the CRD, and we'll have that validation out of the box as well.
And a union discriminator means that only one of several fields could be set.
Yeah. So you have a union discriminator, which is like, the discriminator itself, and you have like one of these struct can only be set. So we have the larger filter struct, and inside those, all the core or extended filters will have like a struct for like the configuration of it, which can be inline, and the open API kubelet like format or validation inside CRD takes care of like making sure that the user sets only one of those.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, my take on this is that it is not ideal, but it feels like the best option we have right now to allow these kind of custom filters or actions, in the sense that core capabilities can be represented as structs and extended ones can be represented as references to CRDs. Not ideal, but I think that's probably sufficient for V1 Alpha 1. And maybe there will be some great movement in the community or whatever to support better ways of doing this. I don't know.
I don't know that
Okay.
CRDs is going to be, or in this case, I'm not sure that CRDs will be all that attractive to implementers, but it is consistent with how we've extended other things. It's just because like the CRD is like, okay, now I need, you know, for a single route, having to create multiple other objects per route seems like a lot.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and then the naming and so on and so forth.
Yeah, you have names for each of these things.
I mean, it does depend, you know, that could potentially be helpful if you have some generic filters that can be represented as CRDs that you want to use across multiple routes. This could actually be a positive, but it depends so much. Maybe it would be helpful to spend a bit more time thinking through or gathering a list of potential custom filters and understanding how that might work here.
Yeah, maybe an authentication filter could be one that you'd use across multiple listeners and multiple routes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to see. Also, this is the alpha. It feels like the most natural from user writing stuff, although it's not helpful for validation, is going to be the raw extension. Although we should see how terrible the CRD option is, given that it's the most well typed.
To me, this feels like a safe way to start, and a safe and consistent way to start, even if it is painful, and then we can focus on removing user pain as this continues on.
Yeah, the in between it would be that string map.
Yeah.
Seems safer, although just as awkward.
Yeah,
so Harry removed that in his last update.
Yeah, which was on my request, suggestion, whatever, because I thought, well, okay, there's 3 different ways to do things here. We should probably get rid of at least one of them. But the map string is great, but it does mean you lose all validation. You lose all, I guess it's the same thing with the raw extension. You lose the benefits of a CRD, but you also lose all the overhead of a CRD. So
yeah, like I'm just thinking probably raw extension, if you're going to go there, you might as well go to raw extension. I have no experience with trying to consume it on the controller side. Embedded resource. Interesting.
As far as I can tell, I've seen it, like the Vitesse operator uses it. It's the only thing I've ever found it. The only place I could find it. And I couldn't find a YAML example. It looks, from the description, I think you basically inline a whole CRD, like including the API group and kind, which
interesting.
Which it doesn't seem like quite what we want. It doesn't seem like quite what we want here.
Yeah, so that CRD would even need its own name and surely not a namespace, but
It would
No, I
be
think
to
the
be
issue is that you would need to know about the CRD statically declared as opposed to dynamically declared by the controller.
So if I think about what I would, in a perfect API, if I had everything I want from the API server, what I would want from this kind of API is the type name, which could be a kind name, and a raw extension, which the API server would know how to validate because it would dynamically match against the kind name. That's kind of what I would ultimately, that's kind of ultimately what feels like the right option here. It's like, I want the raw extension, but I want it with validation, which is associated by the type name.
Yeah, what you want is that when your controller runs, it can patch a CRD, right? Almost. It can like patch itself into an existing CRD.
Yeah, sort of, yeah, almost. And I think embedded resource is almost there, except instead of just raw extension, you need to put like the whole thing. So you would need to put the API version and kind, and then the whatever the fields are for the CRD in there too. It's basically I think it's basically inlining a CRD resource.
Those are actually intriguing ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to know more about this kind of approach. It still does feel helpful, and I guess we don't, at least I don't completely understand all the potential use cases here, but like authentication or some other common filters, it does seem helpful to have a single CRD that defines how that works and just, okay, I want this specific plugin to operate this way, plugin is filter, whatever it is. That seems useful in the sense of a proper CRD ref, but I realize other filters here, other plugins here are going to be more specific to a specific route. But I'm having a hard time picturing exactly what those might be, where you really want the inline capabilities.
Well, I think it's pretty hard to name those CRDs. People are just going to be like, foo1, foo2, and then just kind of wire it back in.
Yeah.
But I can totally get on board with merging this as is with the intention to revisit on the next version.
Yeah, I think at this point that would be my preference as well. Just in the sense that this feels like a good starting point. And the two things we have defined right now, I think we'll likely want to keep. The idea of referencing a CRD and the idea of an internal struct or set of structs that we can use that are core. And maybe in the future, instead of referencing a CRD, we can embed one. Even better, but that's a relatively minimal API change that I think could be backwards compatible, or at least there's a clear upgrade path. So I'm fine with this as it is. With there's some typos here and whatever, but beyond that, I'm fine with the concepts here.
Okay, yeah, I think we should definitely do more thinking about the raw extension stuff.
Yeah.
At the very least, we should probably put some library code to make the handling consistent.
Yeah.
Are we definitely going to ship a validating webhook or something like that?
Doesn't
I think we have to
build it for you?
A Kivy builder, I think, will build the scaffolding for you.
Yeah. Yeah,
it
it will
feels
build
like
some
we
form.
need to,
There's
or at least
there
have
are
a base one.
Yeah, we need base code. You know, the actual deployment specifics are going to get a bit messy because, well, certs and whatever else. But we need to at least have code that can run as a backend for a webhook, like a shared standard code for that. And I think I added this as a note on my conflict resolution item, which I don't know that we'll get to today, but just there's a lot of things there. There's some other issues that have come up that all are things of we need a webhook for this, or we need, and it would be great if we could introduce some kind of label or some kind of way of tracking. Maybe it's just manually in the doc. I'm not entirely sure what that looks like yet. But yeah, I would like to track all the different webhook requirements. So when it comes time to actually implement that webhook, we know what it's going to do. And it seems likely that at least right now, we have not made the webhook a requirement for V1 Alpha 1. But I think even if it's not a requirement, we should describe what this webhook should,
You want to,
what this
Rob? Do you want
webhook
to
will be
file an
responsible
issue and
for.
then just start accumulating everything against it?
Yeah, that works. That works.
Adding a label is also not that hard. Like James, you went through it. You just have to commit somewhere, and then it will just pop up.
Yeah, it's just pretty easy. It's on somewhere on the community repo, I think. Then it just needs someone from the SIG2 probably Bowie just to thumbs up it.
Okay. Okay. I will. I'll follow up on this one, but yeah, I will. Even if we don't have, it seems unlikely that we will have a webhook implementation complete by the time we release V1 Alpha 1. But I'd like to have the scope and requirements for a webhook complete by that time, so it's clear what implementations should be trying to focus on and what will be handled with shared code. Yeah. Okay, well, was there anything else to discuss on the route filtering, or should we move on? All right, the next one I think is from James, and I think this one may also be, yeah, this is just about in. So I don't know that there's much to talk about on this one. I know initially I thought that this should wait for another PR, but I think this is isolated enough that it makes sense on its own. James, is there anything more to say on this PR, or is it basically good after a rebase?
I think it's good. I did rebase it yesterday. Do I need to do it again? I'll check.
Yeah, there's a lot got in the past 24 hours, and so I'll LGTM right after you rebase and get it in.
Thanks.
So,
yeah, I think it's kind of orthogonal to the other one. It should be just adding some extra validation and swizzling things around there.
Sounds good. All right, this one will probably require some more discussion. I don't know how to feel about this, and I appreciate your response, and it makes sense. And I don't like any of the options. But this is the one where you're pulling out both path and headers to their own structs and having, at least in your PR right now, it would be a header section and a path section with value and path match type, correct?
Yeah. I guess what's the, doesn't this match the design pattern that we have in the filters if we're going to loft those?
I think so.
It's a little different, I think, because it's not a union. So Harry's other PR kind of defines the semantics of the match. Yeah, in the one that got merged, 241 updates the doc around the matching.
Yeah.
Let me just find that diff.
So this is the one where you can have multiple matches.
Yeah, so in the match itself, it's an and. So you can have multiple fields specified, and if multiple and the results of matching against each field in the HTTP route match are ANDed, but then the route match, when you have multiple route match structs, it's an OR. So any one of them matching selects the route, but within each match element, you have to match all the specified conditions.
Yeah.
Which makes it a little different to the filter, where filter is, this one of union.
Yeah, and it's more of a modifier, and yeah. So I think my hesitancy towards the path match type is it complicates our simplest use case. It means that there's one extra level of nesting, like you have to do path value / instead of path / but admittedly, this looks really funky. I can't argue with that. The idea that we have path match type here and then header match type here. So maybe we do just need all the nesting in the world and have headers like you've proposed here, but also path like you've proposed as a extra level of nesting with a value and a type, a match type specifically.
I see. So this makes everything consistent.
Yeah,
like path is not special.
Yeah, it makes everything consistent at the expense of a more complicated base case. But maybe consistency is what we want here.
Yeah, I think if you scroll around, I updated the examples, and so you can see the extra level of nesting on path.
I guess examples are usually closer to, yeah, there we go.
There.
Yeah, and in these examples, like this example looks perfect to me. I get it when you have headers and path matching. I get why they're both nested. Where it gets funky is this, where you have match path value bar, assuming that you even, this is probably going to be optional and left out plenty. But I can't think of this is at least consistent.
Yeah, I think this makes it easier to extend as well, because if you have more attributes on path, you don't have to name them path blah.
Yeah.
Like path type, path value, path match. It feels, yeah, this.
Yeah.
Feels okay, even though it's a little bit more verbose. At least it's like consistent.
Yeah.
Consistent, yeah. Like let's say the user, because the API is like the user eventually, hopefully, internalizes a little bit. So like they just kind of write it autopilot. And if you have a consistent way to do things, then there's just fewer surprises. It's sort of like, safely programming in C or some lower level language. It's like you have this like consistent way to do things.
And I saw, Rob, you filed a issue to do a match on query string.
Oh yeah, yes, thank you.
So we could have that would be like a similar sort of struct, right? You would have match and then indent query, and then you would have some kind of type and values in there as well.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know how common that use case is, but or how broadly supported it is, but it just Yeah, that is a good point. If we do expand matching, this gives us a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's ever come up in Contour World, trying to match the query string.
But yeah, I think let's go with this one because it just is more consistent. I feel like if the state spaced inside the user's head has a smaller number of rules, that they, even though it's a little bit more indented or verbose, it's not as surprising to deal with because they don't have to look in the docs to see what something is named per se.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There was one comment here which I resolved by saying that it's illegal to have all the fields in the header match, all the fields in the route match to be nil. So we might want to, I think we want to probably discuss that just briefly.
Doesn't that match nothing? Is that what we decided in the previous one?
So before we had the idea that the default would be a path match of / and default type of prefix. And that would apply to everything by default. And so you would never get to an empty state.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because that matches, at least that matches the expectation from the ingress side.
Yeah, it does.
It's kind of useless to have it match nothing.
I agree. I think that's a more confusing state than just default to match all, and actually have those, like / and prefix. That's pretty clear, to me at least. And I don't think that's going to conflict with any other kind. That's not going to conflict with header matching, as an example.
So we can probably default all this stuff so that you get a prefix match on /.
Yeah.
And you could probably do that at the match, the route match, the top level route match slice. You'd have to add a default there, and then you'd have to add the default inside the HTTP route match struct as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I know for defaults elsewhere, I've had to add the same default a couple different places in case the struct is nil or the struct is present but has nothing present inside it.
So then the default behavior, if you just had a route with an action, it would match everything by default.
Yeah.
That would be the effective behavior.
Yeah. Which I think makes for a pretty simple to use API for the simpler use cases.
Yeah, I think that definitely feels right. Like the fact that if we default to something that is kind of useless, it's kind of like a bad default.
Yeah. Okay, great. James, do you need anything else here, or do you have a good direction to go forward?
No, that sounds great. I can update that today.
Okay, great. I'm going to leave this one till, well, I'll mention it briefly, but this is another PR from Harry that I think is going to be worth talking about in more detail on tomorrow. So I'll mostly leave it, but if anyone wants to take a look before we get to tomorrow, it is relatively significant in that we're adding, well, Harry is adding TLS mode, and also which is terminate or pass through and cert matching behavior for SNI. It seemed reasonably straightforward to me, but Harry's not here, and I think it would be good to get a larger audience tomorrow anyways on this one. But if you want to take a look, this is a new PR that could use some attention. I just want to mention this one. Anyone who's watching the repo may have noticed this conversation. Months ago now, it feels like forever ago, I added this PR to allow referencing namespace scoped resources. This was part of a much larger discussion. And I did not do good at keeping this PR updated and more context. Part of this this discussion went off base and went into why we're using object reference and type local object reference and all these other things. But I've added an update all the way at the end as of today on this PR because it got brought up more recently by Chris, who was interested in it from an ingress perspective. Because whatever we do here should probably mirror whatever we choose to do in ingress class. And that got me to digging back through exactly when this was followed up on. And it turns out on May 28, so again, forever ago, I brought this up to SIG Network in terms of what we should do for ingress class params. And the overwhelming feedback I got at that meeting was that we did not need to support referencing namespace scope resources. I added all the rationale behind that here, and unfortunately the meeting for some reason wasn't recorded or uploaded. I'm not sure what happened there, but this is what I remember coming from that discussion. So if anyone cares about this, definitely come back and follow up here or on the associated issue. Yeah, that's all I'll say. I mean, the high level thing is it's a lot easier to add namespace in the future to this object reference than it is to add it now and then say we want to remove it later. And I haven't seen compelling enough use cases for namespace scope params references yet. So I'd rather just hold off on this until we have really clear use case. And that use case is clear enough to not just convince us here, but convince SIG Network as a whole that this is a good idea and should apply to ingress class as well. So that's the updates on this one. Did anyone have any strong feelings about this this concept? Cool.
I think it's fine as it is.
Yeah. I was going to follow up briefly on this, but I think I'm going to push this to tomorrow as well. UDP route looks pretty close. It just had some feedback that needed some responses, I think. The last thing that, I think conflict resolution is going to get bumped to tomorrow at this point. The last thing I want to mention on this call is the idea of milestone and org maintainers, which I think it might have been Harry's idea that it would be helpful to have a milestone concept in service APIs and be able to label specific PRs or issues as something that belonged in, say, the V1 Alpha 1 milestone. I think that's a really helpful idea. I looked into it, talked with Bob and Contribex, I think. And anyways, it is entirely possible. We need to create a couple PRs in the org repo, and anyone who wants to be a milestone maintainer needs to be a Kubernetes SIGs member. So I wanted to get a few active people that were interested in being maintainers on this list. So we had more people who could be maintaining milestones and whatever else went along with that role. Yeah, so if you're interested, let me know, I guess. And if you're not already a SIGs member and are interested, chances are you're probably already active in this repo, which I think is about all you need to be a SIGs member, so I can help with that as well. yeah, I think that's all I've got to say on that one. I would like to get that milestone set up pretty soon so that we can start triaging issues and understand whether or not something belongs or needs to be solved in time for this V1 Alpha 1 release.
So Rob, like ping you on Slack or something?
Yeah,
or
yeah.
just
Ping
say
me
it
on
right
Slack.
now?
Oh, yeah, or say it right now if anyone's interested. That works too. I'll probably provide another chance tomorrow. You know, I'm hoping for people that that have been active and involved in the project, which we have a good community representation, and just, you know, to have, I don't know, maybe two, three maintainers on this list. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's a reasonable starting point. You can always add more. That was my initial thought here. Very open to volunteers on this one. I know we don't have too many people on this call, so I will mention it again tomorrow. But yeah,
I'll be happy.
think about it. Okay, great. Yeah, are you already an org? I was thinking that would be a good fit. Are you already an org member?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm happy to sponsor you for SIG's membership if you need that. So
okay, so I need to go and I'll just go look up that in the community.
Yeah.
Go do some,
Yeah.
be a PR or something, some kind of, I imagine.
Yeah, yeah. I'll message you on Slack. It's pretty easy.
Cool.
So.
Thanks.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's it for today. Thanks so much, everyone, for your feedback and great participation. I'll move a few of these things on to the next meeting, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
Yeah, if you are blocked on your PRs, just ping on the Slack, and we should be able to look at them.
Yep. Great. All right. Talk to you later.